The man who had turned his perceived disadvantage into comedy gold looked tired of laughing at himself. Kevin Hart sat across from Jimmy Fallon in Studio 6B, his signature energy subdued, as if the armor of humor around his insecurities was becoming too heavy to carry. They'd been playing Size Matters, a Tonight Show game where celebrities discussed how physical attributes had shaped their journeys. For Kevin, it had become a reckoning with decades of defensive humor. "Kevin, here's a fun question," Jimmy had said with his usual energy, though there was something gentle in his approach. "You've built an incredible career partly by embracing your height and making it part of your comedy. How did you turn what some people might see as a disadvantage into such a powerful part of your success?" The question should have been perfect for Kevin. Here was a man who had transformed potential ridicule into relatability, who had taken what bullies might use against him and made it his trademark. This should have been a celebration of resilience and self-acceptance. Instead, Jimmy watched as one of comedy's most energetic performers began to quietly deflate. "Jimmy," Kevin said, his voice missing its usual rapid-fire enthusiasm, "can I be real about something? Because what you just said, it's based on a lie I've been telling myself for years." The studio fell silent, sensing that whatever was coming would strip away the protective layer of comedy Kevin usually wore. "I didn't embrace my height," Kevin continued, his voice carrying a weight that surprised everyone. "I weaponized it. I turned it into a joke before anyone else could, not because I accepted it, but because I was terrified of what people would say if I didn't beat them to the punchline." The confession hung in the studio air like an admission that all the laughter had been masking something much more painful. The audience, expecting typical Kevin Hart energy and self-deprecating humor, instead found themselves witnessing something much more vulnerable, their comedian admitting his comedy was a defense mechanism. Jimmy felt his entertainment instincts immediately give way to concern. "What do you mean you weaponized it?" Kevin looked down at his hands. Hands that had gestured through countless punchlines about his stature. Hands that had worked tirelessly to prove he was bigger than his physical frame. And when he looked back up, his eyes carried something that devastated him: exhaustion. "I mean, I've spent my entire career making jokes about being short, because if I make the joke first, it doesn't hurt as much when other people make it," he said, his voice becoming smaller, more vulnerable. "But the truth is, every single joke I make about my height is like a little paper cut. And after 20 years of paper cuts, I'm bleeding out." The cameras continued rolling, but everyone in Studio 6B understood they were witnessing something unprecedented. One of comedy's most successful performers, revealing the psychological cost of turning pain into profit. Jimmy made a decision that would define this moment. He stood up from his desk and moved to sit directly next to Kevin, understanding that this conversation required presence, not performance. "Kevin, talk to me about when this started," Jimmy said gently. "Elementary school," Kevin said immediately, as if he'd been waiting years to tell this story. "I was always the shortest kid in class, and kids, they don't have filters. They'd call me names, pick me last for teams, treat me like I was less capable because I was smaller." He paused, clearly accessing memories that were still fresh despite being decades old. "I learned that if I made jokes about it, they'd laugh with me instead of at me. But here's the thing. They were still laughing at me. I just convinced myself it was different because I was controlling the narrative." Jimmy leaned closer, sensing the depth of the hurt Kevin had been carrying. "How did that follow you into adulthood?" "It became my identity," Kevin said, his voice cracking slightly. "Kevin Hart, the short comedian. That's who I am to millions of people. But do you know what it's like to never be able to walk into a room without someone immediately commenting on your size? To never be taken seriously because people expect you to be the entertainment? The audience was completely silent, many beginning to understand how humor could become both a survival tool and a prison. I'll give you an example, Kevin continued, tears forming. I was in a business meeting about a serious film project. The first thing the executive said was, "Oh, Kevin, how's the weather down there?" Everyone laughed, including me, because that's what I do. But inside I was screaming. He looked at the audience. Do you know what it's like to want to be seen as more than your physical attributes, but to have built a career on those very attributes? Jimmy felt his heart break for the man sitting next to him. That must be incredibly frustrating. It's more than frustrating, Kevin said simply. It's isolating, because people think I've accepted myself, that I'm confident and secure. But the truth is, I wake up every morning, and the first thing I think about is how I'm going to navigate a world that's literally not built for someone my size. Jimmy was quiet for a moment, absorbing the weight of what Kevin was sharing. Can I ask you something? Away from the comedy, away from the public persona, how do you really feel about your height? Kevin looked genuinely surprised by the question, as if no one had ever asked him to separate his feelings from his comedy routine. I hate it, he said quietly, the honesty devastating. I hate working twice as hard to be taken seriously. I hate that people's first impression is surprise at my size. I hate that I can't reach high shelves, need step stools for cars, that I look like a child next to adults. His voice grew stronger. And I hate that I've turned all that pain into punchlines because it was easier than dealing with the hurt. What do you think actual acceptance would look like? Jimmy asked. I don't know, Kevin admitted, because I've never tried it. I've never just existed as someone who happens to be short, rather than someone whose entire identity is built around being short. Jimmy reached over and placed a supportive hand on Kevin's shoulder. What if we tried it right now? What if you told me something about yourself that has nothing to do with your height? For the first time in the conversation, Kevin looked genuinely confused. I don't know if I can. It's been so central to how I define myself that I'm not sure who Kevin Hart is without the short jokes. Try, Jimmy encouraged. Tell me about something you're passionate about, something you're good at, something that matters to you, that has nothing to do with your physical stature. Kevin was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling to separate his identity from his insecurities. I love helping people, not through comedy, just being there for them. When my friends are going through hard times, they call me. Not because I'm funny, but because I listen, because I care. His voice grew more confident as he continued. I'm a really good father. My kids don't care how tall I am. They just know that I show up for them, that I protect them, that I love them unconditionally. With them, I'm not Kevin Hart the comedian. I'm just dad. How does it feel to talk about those things? Jimmy asked. Different, Kevin said, and for the first time in the conversation there was genuine warmth in his voice. It feels like I'm talking about a person instead of a punchline. Jimmy turned to address the audience. How many people in here love Kevin Hart because of his height? No hands went up. How many people love Kevin Hart because of who he is as a person, his work ethic, his positivity, his ability to make people feel good? Hands shot up throughout the studio, and the applause was immediate and genuine. Jimmy turned back to Kevin. You see that? Your height isn't why people love you. It's not even why you're successful. You're successful because you're talented, dedicated, and authentic when you allow yourself to be. Kevin looked out at the response, and something in his expression began to change. The defensive humor was still there, but it was being joined by something else, possibility. I want to try something, Kevin said, addressing the cameras directly. I want to go one whole week without making a single joke about my height, just to see who I am when I'm not performing my insecurity. The studio erupted in supportive applause. And I want to say something to anyone watching who's ever felt like they had to turn their pain into performance. Kevin continued, his voice growing stronger. You are more than your perceived flaws. You are more than the thing you think makes you different. You don't have to be the entertainment for other people's comfort. He paused, looking directly into the camera. I don't know who Kevin Hart is without the height jokes yet, but I'm ready to find out. And maybe that person is even better than the one I've been performing. Jimmy stood up and embraced Kevin. Not a show business hug, but a real moment of human support and recognition. When they separated, he looked directly at his guest. Kevin, thank you for showing us that self-acceptance isn't about embracing your flaws. It's about realizing that what you think are flaws might just be differences, and differences aren't deficiencies. Thank you for making it safe to stop performing and start being real, Kevin replied. 6 months later, Kevin Hart began incorporating more serious, non-height-related material into his routines and started speaking at schools about body image and authentic self-acceptance. The segment became one of the most shared pieces about body image ever created. Mental health professionals credited Kevin with helping people understand how humor could prevent real healing. Jimmy later said the conversation changed how he thought about comedy. Kevin taught me that making people laugh is a gift, but making them feel understood is a responsibility. Kevin continued being a comedy star, but now his humor came from observation rather than self-deprecation. He learned people didn't need him to be smaller to feel better. They needed him to be authentically himself. The man who had spent years making himself the punchline finally realized he was never the joke. He was the comedian helping others laugh not at differences, but at the shared absurdity of being human.